Playbook for Performance, the official podcast of Shauna Corden, the Joan of Arc for corporate healing and performance. Join the quest to make work fun again by preparing leadership for engaging workplaces. And now, your host.
Hello and welcome everybody to another edition of the Playbook for Performance podcast. I'm your host, Shauna Corden. Our mission is to make work fun again by building better leaders. Now, this month we're talking about quiet quitting and polarization and some tips for our HR partners that are having to deal with the quiet quitting and polarization problems that are emerging in the workplace. So today we're really talking about the antidote to quiet quitting. So what's quiet quitting? Quiet quitting is when people are just showing up to the job, they're doing the bare minimum, they're meeting expectations, and they're not really engaged. And this is not a big surprise for all of you who have read my book, Coach Culture, a Playbook for Winning in Business. You know that one of the citations that I make is this idea that over 60% of people are not engaged at work. And how do we define engagement? Well, engagement is productivity, profitability, and retention. Are we able to keep our top employees? Are they productive? Are they making good decisions that make us profitable? So if 60% of people are not engaged, we already had some quiet quitters. We just didn't call it that. So it's getting more popularity and more visibility, which I'm thrilled about. This is what I like to fix. So let's talk more about this. So we had quiet quitting. I think every HR person will acknowledge this. Most managers will acknowledge this. If we looked at the distribution of engagement of any team of 10 people, you had 2 people who were superstars who said yes whenever you asked for something. They figured out how to make it work with their life and the balance between their personal activities and everything else. And then there were people who were like, that's not my job. And boundaries are good. Don't get me wrong. I'm a huge fan of boundaries. I teach classes on boundaries. I teach people how to reclaim their boundaries. Boundaries are very, very important. But there's a finesse to this. So what I really want to talk about today, but maybe I'll do a bonus lesson on boundaries. What I really want to talk about today is the solution for this quiet quitting, the antidote to quiet quitting, and that is engagement through a coaching culture. Well, how do we define a coaching culture? Well, it's one that's highly engaged, and it's one where managers use a methodology where instead of command and control, I decide everything that we do, I decide how you do it, and I micromanage you to make sure that everything turns out exactly as I had planned. Instead, it's an ask culture. I still create the vision. I still tell you this is what we have promised for this year. Now let's work together on how we get that done. What ideas do you have? What experience can you bring to the table? What else can you share? What would give you an opportunity to grow? How can we grow your network? How can we grow your capabilities? What kind of training and tools do you need to get that done? That is that engagement through a coaching culture process. So it comes into 4 categories. 4. First is, what do I get? This is your pay and rewards. It's your network. It's the prestige. Might be travel if you enjoy business travel. I loved business travel. Went all over the world with that. What is it that you get from your employment? Okay. And in the case of the quiet quitters, it's just the salary. They're not looking to engage any more than that. They might be happy to have a little bullet on their resume that says, I worked at this place between X and X date. Okay. What do I give? So in this case, I'm giving my time, I'm giving my attention, I'm giving my creativity. Sometimes it is sacrifice. We miss out on personal activities, things like that, because we have a work commitment. But what is it that you're really giving? And ideally, your organization has gone through the Strengths Finder assessment. You know what you fall out of bed are good at and really enjoy. And your pie, as we talked about last month in the podcast, is filled with stuff that you really love to give. Your pie chart, 80-90% of what you give every day is your best, your gifts and your talents. There's always that blank sandwich that's there. But in general, that's what we're giving. Now, do I belong is a tricky one. I think depending on the generation that you grew up in, so our greatest generation, our boomers, we're probably of the perspective of work is work. I definitely don't have romance at work. I may have some friends at work, but not necessarily people I'm social with, okay? I think as you get into Gen X, Gen Y, etc., the expectation of more friendships, etc., at work is higher because they're probably spending a higher percentage of their time in the workplace, and this is what they need to do. So this is where they make their friends. This is where they socialize. This is how they have their meals and everything else. So that is the belong. So when we specifically talk about it from the Gallup measure of do I belong, it's questions like, do my opinions at work seem to count? And do I have a best friend at work? Now, this doesn't mean necessarily someone that you spend your weekend and evenings with, but it's someone that you can go to that you trust, that you can share your challenges with, that builds that psychological safety. So episode 1 in this podcast, we talked about psychological safety. So the secret to high performing teams is psychological safety. And the number one way to grow psychological safety is for people to share their challenges. So if you have a best friend at work that you can go to say, gosh, the boss really seems to have something in her craw. Do you know what's going on? That can be the definition of a best friend at work. Or I had to put my cat down and I'm so upset and I'm just on the verge of crying. Whatever that might be, that equivalent of that best friend at work is what we're talking about there. And of course, your opinions. So when I coach leaders, I really try to be very clear when I'm coaching them that what we're looking for is, if this is going to be a primary part of your pie, that I ask you your opinion before I make a decision. When leaders ask opinions after the decision's been made and they're not willing to consult and integrate those opinions, that's not a good sign. Not a good sign. Finally, the last piece is, can I grow? So one of the famous case studies is about a grocery store chain where they thought that they had a real culture problem because they saw employees doing things that were disrespectful. They'd help themselves to an apple. They would leave the restrooms untidy. They, were kind of sloppy in their work. And they all thought it had to do with training and things like that. But it turned out it was because no one knew what the future held for them. There was not a published career path that said you can go from grocery store clerk to supervisor to manager to back office work, etc. They didn't see a career path. They didn't see opportunities for mentoring, for training and tools, etc. So that's what we're really looking at when we talk about that idea of, can I grow? Is there opportunity for me? Do I get to learn? Because learning is such an important part of how people show up. So, field work for this week is to review your culture. What do you give? What do you get? Do you belong and can you grow? Have this discussion with your team. What small changes in habits and behaviors can shift the culture to one that's more engaged? And that is our antidote for quiet quitting. If you would like to run a workshop with your team, a lunch and learn, a half day, a full day, or have specific coaching for an individual on your team, we are here to help. You can send a message to podcast@shawnacorden.com or shauna@shawnacorden.com. If you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. We love to hear your comments. So please put them in there. Thanks, and take good care.
Thank you for listening to Playbook for Performance. To learn more about Shauna Corden, her consulting programs and tools, please visit her website at shaunacorden.com and follow us on social media at Shauna Corden.